Hey there, thinkers. Welcome back to another episode of Critical Hit. My name is S.
And I'm Pin. And today is weird. We were going to review Baldur's Gate a week ago, but we sat down to play it, and we just didn't stop. We got encapsulated since we started playing it, and we only barely managed to come up for air because life demanded it.
Baldur's Gate is based on the popular tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons, set in the Sword Coast, adapted from the second edition of D&D rules. The first two games came out in 1998 and 2000, respectively, and it was a direct sequel. Our third game was a 23-year wait, and takes place 123 years after the events of the second game. The developers wanted to keep and respect the core themes and world of Baldur's Gate, and wanted to give themselves enough time and room to build their own adventure.
This game is developed by Larian Studios, who did the popular co-op isometric CRPG, Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2. And if you're familiar with the combat in those games, this will feel very familiar to you. But it feels like they took everything they learned with the previous game's combat, the turn-based strategy infused with elemental and environmental combat, and they really tried to perfect it here. It still has the elements reacting to each other, such as electrifying or turning a puddle to ice, but if you don't want to fight someone in the next room, well, maybe I should just stack some boxes in front of the door to lock him in.
Larian Studios understood their audience with this game. When I think D&D, I think choose my own adventure. I have a dungeon master who will set some boundaries, and there are going to be rules, world rules, to follow. But the rest is limited to my imagination, or I can let the dungeon master take me on his pre-built journey. Starting with the character creation, choosing exactly what I wanted or giving me options to do the preset path, or origin as I call it. This game felt like D&D, but if you choose the Dark One path, it makes you feel a little more reminiscent of a Baldur's Gate game. And really, with how many choices you had to choose from to complete all the stages in the game, it really remained true throughout the entire playthrough.
Like all games, this is not going to be for everyone, and if you look hard enough, yeah, you can find some faults. I have heard battle difficulties complained about, but there are 3 difficulty settings. If you're new to CRPGs, this is still a good place to start. If you're looking for a CRPG, it would be difficult to find a better one out there. I would actually rate this a little easier than their Divinity series, but I would consider this really to be Larian Studios' magnus opus.
The story is incredible, the world building is phenomenal, and we had a blast with the gameplay. This game is a great co-op experience. Just be careful with your companions. One bite of the neck or show of a magic spell can quickly lead to your companions getting a little thirsty for you. However, if you like that kind of thing, this game has you covered in droves.
Now that you know our thoughts and that we highly recommend it, let's talk about the controversy surrounding Baldur's Gate 3. Even weeks prior to its release, other developers had begun really to panic here, declaring that Baldur's Gate 3 should be treated like an anomaly, and people shouldn't expect other games to be like this. Or in other words, Baldur's Gate 3 should not be looked at as the new standard for games. And while I understand the argument for indie studios, I think most people get that indie studios will give you a much smaller self-contained experience for a cheaper price. The fact that a AAA studio thinks that standards for games should be to release content unfinished or under-deliver to curb expectations certainly speaks to the downfall of games.
I can't remember the last time a game made me feel that rush, or that one more turn, or just a little bit longer, like, oh no, now it's 3 a.m. This should be a huge wake-up call to all studios that yes, it takes a lot of work, and you need to push the boundaries to entice the whole market. When Cyberpunk 2077 released, it was not ready. And while CD Projekt Red finally fixed the issues, this isn't the state that games should be in when released. Bethesda launched Fallout 76 and was more concerned with microtransactions than an actual working game. That seems to be an industry standard. And at this point, with Starfield coming out at the end of the month, I would be surprised if it was as polished as Baldur's Gate 3.
Baldur's Gate 3 had 3 years of early access by pre-releasing Act 1 and worked with their community to update the game for what their customers wanted. They grew their small studio from 150 people to over 400 during this time, and it shows they did build the game that people wanted. Not every studio could do this, but as people including IGN said recently, why can't a studio the size of thousands try to compete with this?
Gaming studios are in the business of entertainment, right? And they need to compete for our attention and money? We all understand that it's really hard to make video games, but the bar should have been a lot higher than it has been for a long time. Developers have been so worried about squeezing every cent out of their customers instead of wanting to give them the experience they actually want. Looking at you, Diablo Immortal. I hope studios start to tell themselves they can do better moving forward. It's not okay to achieve the bare minimum anymore.
To be fair though, most of the developers that commented on this have since walked back on those comments. Maybe, just maybe, we'll see them step up their game to compete with studios like Larian moving forward. I especially get the feeling the next Dragon Age game may be compared pretty heavily to this, BioWare. Thanks for joining us today. Make sure you tell us your thoughts down in the comments, and we hope to catch you in the next video.
Toodles!
Bye guys.